In 1950, one of the most famous authors of the 20th century, William Faulkner, won the Nobel Prize, and in his speech, he talked about the atomic bomb. As he writes, "Our tragedy today is a general and universal physical fear so long sustained by now that we can even bear it. There are no longer problems of the spirit, there is only the question, when will I be blown up?" Can you imagine that? Can you put yourself in that world, 1950, only 5 years after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki? A world of mounting Cold War tension, a world that very well might blow up. Don't get me wrong, we could be blown up. I can't tell the future, but for better or worse, I don't live in fear of it. Frankly, I don't think about it much at all. No, if you asked me for the existential terror of today, of our world, I'd probably say climate change. And that is a fear, a real one, a powerful one, but it's a fear that hits different, and I mean that literally. Climate change gives us a million different cuts, a million ways to mourn. It gives us time to watch how it all shakes out. A bomb, though, it hits us, it hits everyone else, and then, well, that's it. So imagine having a little part of yourself devoted every day to being scared of a thing like that. It must be hard. That's not what Faulkner is here to say, however. To him, what's hard isn't so much the bomb as it is art. As he says, because of the bomb, the young man or woman writing today has forgotten the problems of the human heart in conflict with itself, which alone can make for good writing. The old universal truths lacking which any story is ephemeral and doomed. Love and honor and pity and pride and compassion and sacrifice. Faulkner's right. It is hard to make art when you're afraid, when you have the kind of fear that melts your brain. And maybe art itself becomes scary in times like that. To deal with the truths of the heart, love and honor and pity and pride and compassion and sacrifice is to acknowledge that humans are worth something. And who wants to do that? Make that kind of commitment when you are reminded over and over and over that you are nothing. Reminded of the nothing you will feel when everything is ash. This is the first in a 3-part series of videos. The series is a bit unconventional for me. Each part will be about a completely different topic, and I never will connect them explicitly. But they are all about this. About art, about why we're afraid of art, and about how we make art at the end of the world. And with that, let's jump in. In 2009, the artist Goshka Makuga made a work of art called The Nature of the Beast. The piece has 3 elements. The first element is a sculpture of Colin Powell, the former General and Secretary of State. His body is made here of stone and rubble, carved by bombs. The second is a recreation of the table in the UN Security Council room. It tells us the time and place of the work. It is the 5th of February, 2003. Colin Powell sits in front of the global stage and justifies the Iraq War to the UN and to the world. The third is, well, it's a bit tricky. As you can probably see, there's a lot to it, but for now, I'll just say that it's a reproduction of a tapestry made of the painting Guernica. For those who don't know, the painting is by Pablo Picasso, and it depicts the Nazi bombing of the small Spanish town of Guernica, where 5,000 civilians were killed. And it's relevant for our purposes now because the UN owned that tapestry reproduction of Guernica. And on that day, in the UN, during Colin Powell's press conference, the image was hidden by a big blue curtain. So if we want to unpack this work of art, where do we begin? What do we do? Well, the piece is obviously interested in the Iraq War, in the people who began it, in the rooms they sat in, so why not talk about it? What is the nature of that beast? You know, I grew up at a perfect time to never learn much about the Iraq War. I was 5 when the Twin Towers fell. I didn't understand it or the shadow it would leave on this country. On that day, I was bored. I wanted to watch cartoons. I remember 2 years later, I went to school and told my friend, "Did you know we're at war?" I didn't understand that either, but it felt interesting, almost surreal to say out loud. As I grew older, the picture remained blurry. I was a kid. It was on the periphery of my life. People didn't talk about it that much. My family wasn't all that political. But there was one bit of information I knew about the war, one sentence I could say because I'd heard it so many times. There were no WMDs. And what a strange sentence that is. What an odd thing to wrap your little mind around. There were no WMDs. These words invite the Iraq War into our lives and our conversations, but they do so only through negation. The only thing we know about this historical moment is that it should not be, that we did not find what we were looking for. The only thing we can see is an absence. And the thing is, so many years later, I still don't know that there's a better sentence I could say. Don't get me wrong, I know more now. I mean, I'm not an expert or anything, but I know enough that I could tell you, or at least synopsize for you, all kinds of stories about the Iraq War. I could tell you a story about fathers and their sons. Around a decade earlier, George Bush Sr. engaged America in the Gulf War to fight against Iraq and their invasion of Kuwait. And there was a feeling among high-ranking members of Bush Jr.'s White House that they had left unfinished business, hadn't taken out the man himself, Saddam Hussein. I could tell you a story about 9/11, the sadness and fear and anger and racism that lingered in its wake. Kissinger felt that 9/11 humiliated America and that Iraq needed to be humiliated in turn. George Bush reportedly told a group of religious leaders that he was having trouble controlling his bloodlust. I could tell you a story about lies. Lies upon lies upon lies. Lies about 9/11, about anthrax, about WMDs. All of it woefully incomplete, based on unreliable intelligence. All of it championed by a government that could not be bothered to care. The running line of the White House was that we didn't want the smoking gun on Iraqi WMDs to be a mushroom cloud. We needed to take them out before they took us out, regardless of evidence. I could tell you a story about politics, the true believers and the opportunists who saw that a war could be fought, saw that the political will was there, saw that they had a chance to write the president a blank check to take out the terrorists, and who took it. And of course, I could tell you a story about power. The Soviet Union had fallen. America was the lone dominant force on the globe, and it was time, many thought, to use that power. We wanted an ally in the Middle East. We wanted political, ideological, and economic control in the region, and it doesn't hurt that Iraq had massive amounts of oil. These stories are good to tell, I think. It's not my aim to imply that history doesn't matter, that we shouldn't look into why things happened the way they did. But still, I can't help but ask, do any of these things I just said give us what we want? Do they tell us the nature of this beast? And no, I don't think so. And that's because they can't. Because none of it adds up. When all was said and done, around $1 trillion were spent, between 500,000 and 1 million people were killed, a country was ravaged and destroyed, and for what? Democracy did not flourish in the Middle East. We did not find a stable ally in the region. We didn't discover weapons of mass destruction. We didn't find true vengeance in the purging of Iraqi blood, and it didn't heal the country, and they never said, "We're sorry." Soon after 9/11, politicians close to George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, Paul Wolfowitz, desperately wanted to find some connection between the destruction of the Twin Towers and Saddam Hussein. The problem was, no such connection could be found. The CIA wasn't telling them what they wanted to hear. And so it was that the Defense Department established their own intelligence group. And over time, this group became famous for a document nicknamed the Beautiful Mind Scroll, referencing the 2001 John Nash biopic and the fun equations it depicted. On the scroll, a literal piece of parchment, I'm led to believe, there were two main phrases, Saddam Hussein and 9/11. What connected these things? I don't know. Nobody knew. That's why they needed a Russell Crowe to figure it out. When I learned about this document, I couldn't help but think of the 1997 Canadian horror film Cube. 5 people wake up in a big cube room, not knowing who they are or what's going on. The room is connected to other rooms, and there are puzzles and there are traps waiting to kill them. It's a great movie. And in my favorite scene, this hippie-ish conspiracy-loving lady, Holloway, says this.
It's all the same machine, right? The Pentagon, multinational corporations, the police. Like, you do one little job. You build a widget in Saskatoon, and the next thing you know, it's 2 miles under the desert, the essential component of a death machine. I was right. All along my whole life, I knew it. I told you, Quentin, nobody's ever gonna call me paranoid again. We gotta get out of here and blow the lid off this thing.
It all makes sense now. It all finally makes sense. All my theories were right. But then Worth, a guy who worked in the cube before waking up in it, tells her that she's wrong.
This may be hard for you to understand, but there is no conspiracy. Nobody is in charge. It's a headless blunder operating under the illusion of a master plan. Can you grasp that? Big Brother is not watching you.
Why put people in it?
Because it's here. You have to use it or you admit it's pointless.
For me, that is the Iraq War. We want reason. We want to look at some names on a sheet and connect them until everything makes sense, even a bad kind of sense. But the truth, I think, is that the nature of this beast lives in the nothing between 9/11 and Saddam Hussein, lives in the fever dream of a dramatized genius, lives in the vapid desires of a president with no real plan and no real purpose, lives in a black hole so deep and so dark that real meaning cannot enter. So, okay, I guess we should turn our attention back to our main subject, Makuga's work of art. Why is it like this? What is it trying to say about Iraq or about art? And what is this Guernica tapestry doing here? And what I want to say is that maybe there's something powerful, almost uplifting about it. Let me talk for a second about the Canterbury Tales, written by Geoffrey Chaucer. One of the last stories in his book is called The Manciple's Tale, and it's about the origin of modern crows. In the olden days, the god Apollo had a pet crow, but crows were different back then. They had beautiful white feathers and were gifted at speech, could imitate the voice of any person when they told their stories. Apollo had a lover, Coronis, and as it happened, she cheated on him. When the god returned home, his crow told him the sordid details, said cacao, 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 and what could Apollo do? He had to kill the woman. Still, he felt bad, awful in fact. This was not the story he wanted. And so Apollo punished the crow too. He took away the bird's white feathers, and he took away its voice. Now shalt thou, false thief, give up thy song, and ache thy white feathers everichan, nevera in all de leafness shalt thou speka. Forgive me for that terrible butchering, by the way. The point of the tale, from the Manciple's perspective, is that you should restrain your words, pick your battles. Sometimes the truth is not worth saying. Simple. Still, there's something odd about this narrative, something that goes unspoken by the Manciple and by Chaucer. Put simply, crows do have voices. Sure, they don't sing beautifully anymore, but they squawk nonetheless. Apollo's job is forever incomplete. And perhaps it is the same way with Makuga's piece. Sure, the people at the UN covered up Guernica. They tried to silence it, But it didn't take. We know what sits behind the blue curtain. We know the message it has waiting for us. And that they hid it in the first place is evidence of its enduring and confrontational power. You can try to take the crow's voice away, but it will always linger with its ugly song. The truth finds a way. I want to say all that. I really do, but I don't know. I'm just not buying it. Let me tell you, for a moment, all the steps that went into Macuga's piece here. First, there was the bombing of Guernica, the real event, the 5,000 lives lost. Then, Pablo Picasso painted it, produced it for us as this imaginative, surreal bit of art. Then, they made a tapestry of that painting and hung it in the UN. Then, Macuga borrowed that tapestry, put it on exhibition, and took a picture. Finally, she turned that photograph into yet another tapestry and put that on display. There's something almost delightful about this, I think. Guernica here is not merely produced, but endlessly reproduced, seen over and over in a million different forms. It's beautiful. But here's the thing, that's not what happened. The people at the UN covered up the tapestry. And sure, maybe they did that because it was just too powerful and ominous, but I don't really think so, do you? More likely, it was just a meaningless coincidence. Only 10 to 20% of the tapestry would have shown up on camera anyway. It would have made for a messy composition in a crowded scene, and in any case, it's not hard to cover up a bit of art. If you already have the curtain on hand, it probably takes around 10 minutes. It's the sort of thing you can do without even thinking about it. No, Macuga's piece does not tell us the story of the triumph of art, it tells us a fantasy. What if we did all see the painting? What if it was depicted countless times for everyone in the world to witness and ingest and learn from? What if the crow squawked and everybody sat down and listened? It's a fiction, isn't it? At the end of the day, the people in the UN Security Council were off to reproduce Guernica. That much is true, but you don't need art to do that. You don't need abstraction and meaning and thought. You just need to bomb a bunch of people for no reason. Job done, you made another Guernica. Still, you can't help but wonder, what if we did see it? What if the tapestry went uncovered, the blue curtain never hung? Well, we'd see the chaos and destruction of a world in carnage. We'd see the faces of the dying as they stand with nothing left to do. We'd see the virgin and child crying out in terror. And maybe, most importantly, we'd see the flaming bull, the harbinger of the end of the world. It is the only figure on the painting that is not in anguish, the only one who looks back at us. It is a beast with no nature, and it would have been next to a beast with no nature. I won't ask if that would have been enough. Of course it would not have been. But would it have meant something meaningful and important? Would it have given us anything at all? And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. So that's the end of the video, and if you liked it, and you like my work in general, then I'd highly recommend signing up for CuriosityStream and my streaming service Nebula for less than $15 a year. Every month for the foreseeable future, I'll be releasing a little bonus video on Nebula. I have a bunch up already, and coming up this month, I actually have a pretty cool and substantial essay about the film Whiplash. I think it's pretty fun. With a subscription to CuriosityStream, where you can watch great nature documentaries like this David Attenborough ant doc, you also get access to Nebula, where you get my videos early, those bonus ones I talked about, and access to tons of other stuff. Content from Sarah Zed, Tom Scott, and Lindsay Ellis, who just recently made an exclusive video about The Lord of the Rings that's really good. Anyhow, if you like the sound of that, sign up at the link in the description. I think it's a really fair deal, and it obviously supports the channel. So that's it. That's the end of the video. I hope you liked it. I feel ways about it. If you did like it, like, comment, and subscribe, and give me money on Patreon if you want to. You also get my bonus videos that way if you'd rather just it be direct or whatever. Anyway, now it's time for my Patreon question of the video. Kelly Weiler asks, what kinds of questions are you hoping to get when you solicit questions? Is there something on your mind that you want to chat about, but the topic hasn't come up? So, I really like making these little Q&As at the end of videos. It's a nice little cathartic process to do, to put the tag on the end of the thing and just have it be done and have this fun little thing. But I'll be honest, by this point in the process, I'm so creatively and psychically bankrupt by the process of making a video. Hi, Totoro. That I'm not looking for any kind of question. I like answering the questions, but I'm happy with whatever you ask. Anyway, thank you so much for your time. I do hope you enjoy the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye.